that we are getting the opportunity here at Ringwood East. My name's Carol, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the president here at Ringwood. And I'm so thrilled that we've actually had the opportunity to welcome Frances here today to do this very different workshop, face reading. Frances gave me a reading with face, do my face, and it was just awesome. So you guys are in for a treat today. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to say thank you to Frances and leave you in her very capable hands. And I know you're going to have a fantastic afternoon. So thank you, Frances.
Thank you, Carol, for a beautiful introduction. I'm going to sit down like you all are, because I've got a dodgy standing up. Hopefully Arthur's got my video thing happening over there. Pushed on. Fantastic. So welcome everyone. I'm Frances, and I'm just going to get you to go around the circle and just say hello and your name, just so that we kind of warm up the energy here, because this is all about energy. So yes, I'm Frances.
I'm Amanda. I'm Jenny.
I'm Lisa.
Mary.
Sandy.
Juliet.
Diane.
Larry.
Ron.
Lynn. Cheryl. Alex.
Gemma.
Margie.
Arthur.
Cecilia.
James, sometimes called the bastard, yes.
Censor that.
Tim.
Kim.
James.
Beautiful. I'm still Frances over here. So welcome and thank you for coming. This is my very first workshop on anything really, on the face reading particularly, but I'm doing my own workshop. I have collaborated in the past doing workshops in certain psychic development, etc., and it's been quite a while ago, but this is my first workshop. I did do a talk at a Reiki gathering back in March, and so that was my first way of introducing this topic about Chinese face reading. So I'm going to ask you a question. What drew you here? And you can just put your hand up if you want to say what drew you here. What are you really here for? What is it that you'd like to take away from this workshop today?
Find out more about our faces and other people's faces, obviously.
Yes, fantastic. Anybody else?
Yeah. Develop the gift of discernment.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. Anyone else?
I'm just here because I'm fascinated.
Yeah, love it. Love their energy. Arthur?
I have noticed a repetition within my own experiences that certain people have a certain trait, but they also look a certain way.
Yeah.
So this is more about validating what I got on an instinctual basis as to see how it correlates.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Good. So I want to start, and I know we're starting late, but I will certainly make up for that. So I want to share a quote with you. I love quotes, and it just kind of helps set the tone for what I want to talk about after them. So this quote is by Rumi, and he says, "By God, when you see your beauty, you will be the idol of yourself." So again, by a show of hands, I want to ask you, who's good at remembering names? You're good at remembering names. You pick the one out of the whole group. Fantastic, well done. And there are people that are very good at remembering names. And who's good at remembering faces? It's like you see a face, it's imprinted, and you remember that face, even though you may not click onto what that person's name is. So there's some startling scientific facts that I'd like to share with you. Scientists have discovered that it takes 1/10 of a second of seeing a new face that we make a judgment about that person. So how we perceive what that person's like. So 1/10 of a second. So it kind of shows how all judgmental we all are. So in that split second, you decide whether you trust that person or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So apparently they've determined by brain scans of babies only 9 minutes old that they prefer to look at faces. So they're already showing these babies as young as 9 minutes old faces or pictures, and they prefer to look at faces. And as little as 12 hours old, they recognise the picture of their mum. So how profound is that? So we respond to faces, and we respond to people's features, we respond to a person's nose, we respond to their wrinkles, and women are going to love this, yeah, and wrinkles as well. So I want to I want to tell you what you're going to benefit from coming to this workshop for, because you've actually taken time out of your precious day today to be here, and I just want to show you a lot of gratitude for doing that. I know quite a few faces here, especially some friends, but also some from the church. So I know that you're here because you're interested, and you're here about learning about yourselves and also about personal development. But this is also spiritually linked. This is one of the reasons why we're doing it here in the church, because we are all soul. We're all spirit coming into a physical body to have this experience in life and to learn lessons. And some of our lessons in life are not going to be that easy, and some will be pretty good. But we came into this life with a blueprint, and our face is the way it is for a reason. It's as if our soul has intended for us to experience life with the makeup of who we are, so that we can learn specific lessons. And with understanding what your features say about you, you'll have a better understanding of what makes you tick, and why you have certain behaviours, why you tend to be triggered by certain emotions. When something happens, what emotion you're most likely to experience straight away. And also what beliefs you may naturally come in with. So your face tells you a lot more about yourself than what you may realise. So after this workshop today, I hope you leave with a greater appreciation of who you are, what your face has to say about you, and also to appreciate those features that you might look in the mirror and say, oh, I don't like that, or I don't like that sag, or I don't like, the way my nose points. You might just look at that and say, now, wow, now I understand what that means. Now I have a greater appreciation that there was my soul's intent for me to be this way, and hopefully then develop more of a sense of self-love. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. So I want to just tell you briefly what led me into this work. I've been a Reiki practitioner since 1999. I loved how energy could flow through me and through my hands, and I placed them on my then 1-year-old son, who was not sleeping very well, and I found that within a few days he was sleeping. And so I had a greater appreciation of how energy works through us, and energy also works through our faces, interestingly enough. So I have been on studying life, studying why people get sick, because that's one of the reasons I started practicing Reiki. I wanted to put my hands on people and help them to feel a sense of peace, calm, and to heal whatever pain they were experiencing. But I also wanted to understand what was going on underneath the surface of that pain. We don't just get pain or disease or illness randomly. There's a particular reason why. So over the years I've developed and added on more modalities, mind-body modalities, to help me develop more understanding and to support my clients more effectively. And then a couple of years ago, I should say 3 years ago, that's how quickly time's going, in 2016 I was doing a random search on YouTube, and I was studying body language at the time, because I was wondering, how do our bodies give messages about ourselves? And I came across a video where a lady called Jean Hayner was interviewing or giving a face reading for a psychic medium called Colette Baron Reid. Does anybody know her? Mm. Yeah, I think she's fabulous. So she was giving a reading of her face, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting that you could read so many details about a person's face. And so I went on to search her website. I got very passionate about it, and I just wished that she had a course that I could study. And she had no online course. She's all the way in San Francisco, and there was nobody here in Australia teaching this stuff. And interestingly enough, somebody was listening to me, because I subscribed to her newsletter, and then she sent a newsletter saying, I'm going to do an online course. Woohoo! So I signed up for that straight away. I started back in, I think, October 2016. I did a 6-month online course studying about reading the patterns of nature, as I'm going to go into what this is about the 5 elements of nature, which the Chinese believe they base a lot of their philosophy on in regard to what makes up who we are. So I studied her course, and then in March 2017 I flew to San Francisco for 1 week to do her live training for certification, and then went on to do 10 case studies, etc., to develop and grow more and continuing to understand the benefits of this Chinese face reading. So what is Chinese face reading? What it is a branch of Chinese medicine, and Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years. And the Chinese were the first therapists, I suppose. They would be, well, the first coaches really. They were face readers that would sit with a client or with a person, read that person's features to understand what health imbalances were going on. They'd look for the size of the nose, the pigmentation, if there was different discolorations going on, and then they would help that person bring themselves back into balance. And then they realised after a little while that by reading those same features, they could actually read that person's personality. They could actually understand what beliefs that person was going to have, what emotions they would be having, what their true calling can fall into that as well. So you were born with the features you have for a main reason. And what it is to mirror your soul's intent. And this is what this workshop is about, to give you a glimpse into what your features say about you. But more importantly, for you to now develop more of a sense of compassion for your fellow man, for your loved ones, for your kids, for your husband or your partner, for the people that you meet in the street and say, oh, now I know what that mouth means, or I have a better understanding of why that person's behaving the way they are. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey and try and explain to you as best as I can about what the Chinese philosophy is in regarding to the 5 elements of nature. So is everybody familiar with the 5 elements? Have you heard about them? Anybody not? Have you heard about them? Fantastic. Oh, that's you up.
Me too.
You too? Yeah. Thank you. And this, I'm going to pass this around so you can all see this. But this is a diagram. Who's gone to see The Lion King? Everybody seen The Lion King? They talk about at the very start of the movie and even at the end, the circle of life. The circle. And what it is, there is a circle to life. There is a pattern to nature. And the Chinese talk about the 5 elements of nature. And the 5 elements they talk about are fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And the cycle actually starts with water and goes around water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And so these particular patterns of nature all have their own specific qualities. And so when we look at nature or we look at time of life, water relates to, for instance, the nighttime, the dark, and the colour associated with water is black. But it's pre-birth. It's when the embryo is still, small and it hasn't been born yet. And I'll go further into the qualities of these particular patterns. So life starts with water. And then we move into wood, which is then that child, that baby being born and growing into a child who's got so much enthusiasm and just wants to learn and grow and have fun, basically. Well, not so much fun, but get on with growing up and transforming. And then the cycle continues, and so water feeds wood. That's kind of how this pattern works. And so wood then continues on to fire. Wood feeds fire. So you can imagine we burn a stick and then it creates a flame. So fire relates to the prime of your life, to when you're a teenager and you're full of enthusiasm, you've got a lot of energy, you want to get out into the world and just explore and have fun. It's all about fun. And so fire, when we break down fire, it becomes compost, it becomes earth. And earth is relating to the early afternoon, where we've just had our lunch and we're tired and we just want to relax and not do too much during the day, but it also relates to midlife, where we've achieved a lot of stuff, we've got our home there, we just want to kind of, not do too much. We want to kind of relax a bit. Although midlife these days, I'm midlife and I'm still pretty active, so I'm not really fitting that as pattern so much. But back in those days, that very much was the pattern. And then Earth then melts and creates metal. And metal is that time of life where you're coming to the end of your life. You're coming to the ages of 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s. Some people live past 100. And you're looking back at life and saying, what went right and what went wrong, and looking at how you can refine life and start to let go of things. So there's that child at the very start, which is water, or the embryo, not being born yet. And then the cycle goes on to childhood, onto young adulthood, to midlife, and then to later stages of life, which is when you're older and maturer. So each of these patterns of nature actually either nurture each other, or they repel each other, or they control each other. So water feeds wood, wood feeds fire, fire feeds earth, and earth feeds metal. So that's the natural cycle of life. But there's also cycles where certain patterns will control other patterns. So water, for instance, controls fire. Water naturally puts out the fire. And fire will control metal because it burns metal and breaks it down. Metal will control wood. If you imagine an axe, metal will cut wood. And wood will control earth, it breaks up the earth. So that's just a general bit of an outline. I'm going to share that around just so you can understand the cycles a little bit, because it's kind of fundamental, because as I go further, I'll explain a little bit why certain patterns in our nature can either nurture other patterns or control them, and why people in our life we feel we can naturally feel we get on with. And then other people we kind of feel a bit repelled. There will be reasons for that, and these features can already be, patterns can be represented already in our face. So let's go to the first diagram. Any questions about that as I go? No questions. So I've, in collaboration with my amazing graphic designer, Jermaine, from Jeremy Designs, we've created images that represent these particular patterns of nature. So here is water. I'm hoping you can all see it. Can you see that? So water, as I said earlier, is about that before birth. It relates to the time of night. It also relates to death too, because as I said, the cycle begins with water, but it also ends with water as well, because when we pass, we move back into that pattern of water. So water, if we were to give it an archetype, is called the innovator. So with water, we can also say that this pattern relates to the innovator, the person. This is a person who is very creative. And when we do this exercise shortly, we'll have a look and see what your features talk about here.
Do we need to make notes?
No, you'll be fine.
Okay.
You can come and take pictures of these things if you want later. Yep. So if we talk about the innovator is a person who is very creative, can come up with really creative solutions. A person with a lot of water in their nature has wisdom in their bones. They naturally have this innate intuitiveness. They're very highly creative, highly intuitive, and they also have wisdom that if they were to tap into can be easily expressed. So the qualities of water, or a person, and I'm going to show you in a minute what the actual features relate to this particular pattern, but I want to just show you what the qualities are first. So the qualities are being highly intuitive, being very creative, and very courageous. These people are people that have an innate strength, and they will want to move through any challenging times. If you imagine water, water flows through things. So a person with a lot of water in their nature needs a sense of freedom. They can't be hemmed in. They need to be able to go out and explore, and in teenage years, people with a lot of water will need freedom to go overseas and explore and do very creative things. A person with water will be very determined, independent, and very artistic. If you imagine a person who's allowed to have the freedom to do their own thing, they will naturally become quite creative and quite artistic. There's a mystery to this particular pattern. People that have this pattern quite strongly in their nature will come across quite, maybe sometimes a bit aloof, but they'll also, they're people that are deeply emotional. They feel their emotions quite deep, and they will not necessarily show those emotions, and so they can come across quite mysterious. They need freedom, and also one of the patterns can be quite stubborn. Anybody relate to being quite stubborn around here? And I'll show you what that feature is. With each of the patterns, or with each of these elements of nature, there is an emotion that relates to it. And for this particular pattern, fear is the emotion that a person is most likely going to experience. Now, when I talk about fear, it's not that type of fear where you get to the sidewalk and decide to turn left or right and then cross the road in order to protect yourself. This is a primal fear. It's a fear that they don't belong, or a fear that they are somehow different to other people and people don't quite understand them. People with this pattern can also fear being alone, or actually feel that they're alone and lonely in the world. They may complain, I'm all alone in the world. And their greatest fear is the fear of abandonment. Children with this particular pattern quite strongly in their nature tend to have nightmares, or tend to be a little bit clingy. Where are you, Mum? Where are you, Dad? And they also, because this is kind of like a dreamy energy as well, more predisposed to having being very highly creative in their minds. So many having quite a strong intuition and imagination, but can also create stories in their mind about things that may not necessarily be true. And trust is the core issue that can come up for this pattern, meaning trusting their own intuition. Even though they predominantly have quite a strong intuition, they've been born with this, people with this pattern will have issues naturally around trusting their intuition. Did I really feel that? Did I really get that? But also they may have mistrust of other people or other people's motives. And again, that could be where stories are being created in their mind. And the colour associated with this pattern of water is black, but also blue. Any questions about that? I'll give you a little bit more foundation to this as well. These are people on a daily routine, they're not morning people. So if you're a person who likes to sleep in, like I do, and has trouble getting out of bed early in the morning, you're likely to have a lot of this particular pattern. You need to be able to flow through your day. And people with this pattern will naturally have really creative occupations. So we see people that are healers, because natural healing ability comes with this particular pattern. Psychic mediums particularly have this strong pattern in their nature. And also anything to do with mystery and magic, and anything to do with risk, because these people actually are quite, they're not too fearful of risk. Even though they're fearful of being left alone and lonely, they can be risk takers. Right? And so that's water. And so then water then gets wood. Now, as you see, and I should have indicated too there on that picture there with water. I'll go into that a bit later with the actual the features. So wood, the archetype for wood is the warrior. Now these are people who see a problem in the world and they want to fix it. They're the people that see, they have this strong humanitarian quality about them. You'll see people that start rallies and things that are going not quite right out in the world. They're the ones that they see that there needs to be change, and they'll get out there and create that change. Now the qualities of a wood person is being humanitarian. They're very optimistic people. They like to look at solutions, and they can be quite creative at coming to solutions, but they'll come to solutions in more of a linear, logical fashion. They're very organised. These are people that like structure. Their desk will be tidy, they'll have things in their place, and they just need to know where to find things. Can be quite competitive people with this pattern. They'll see what somebody else is doing and they'll compare and they'll try to make what they're doing better. It's just a natural inclination. They're very driven, very rebellious. I won't say very rebellious because not every wood person is, but they will kind of fight the rules. They don't usually like to be confined by rules. Very eager to learn. Now, if you're a student and you love to study, and I'm a bit of a student. I've studied about 4 or 5 courses at the same time. They just want to keep learning. So the pattern of wood really represents that baby that's just being born and is growing. But also in nature, it represents a little shoot in the ground, ready to come up out of the ground and grow into a tree. Now, this nature of growing is all about transformation. So people with a lot of wood in their nature are all about transformation and about change. They want to get to the point, and let's get to the end of the race the quickest. These people can also be quite confident. Now, the emotions that relate to this particular pattern of wood is anger or frustration. And this is an anger that's kind of quick and short and over. It's like the thunderclap. And what this anger really is in Chinese medicine relates to being driven. Now, there's all different types of anger, and I'm sure we've all experienced different types of anger. But this particular anger is when a person is trying to achieve a goal and feels like something's blocking them. And there's this natural rise of anger that comes up, and then, let's get moving, let's get this sorted. And then it's over and done with. So that's the natural tendency of anger for a wood person. And the colour associated with this particular pattern is green, or different shades of green. Any questions about that? Does it make sense? And I'm loving all the people that were wearing green today, because you're all supporting my green. That is, and I'll show this later. So this is fire. Wood feeds fire. And the fire archetype is the lover. The lover or the performer. People that have a lot of fire in their nature are very good at performing. They love to feel special and they love to make other people feel special. These are people that like to share a sense of joy from their heart. And so what they do is they do things to make other people feel good about themselves. So they might be a person that naturally touches another person and say, "Are you okay? How are you going?" They're people who really just want to share from the heart. And so performers naturally have to have this naturally deep emotion, being able to feel their emotions. If you look at a performer or an actor, for instance, they have to be able to connect with their emotions in order to display that in their acting. So these people are passionate people. They love to feel connected with people. They love to be tactile. They love to spread joy. Excitement is what they're very good at. They have this ability to naturally inspire excitement in people. Passionate, they're warm, they can be quite dramatic, and of course as a performer they can be, but people just naturally who have this pattern can go into drama when they're upset. So, you know, if you've got a friend who has had a relationship breakup and they're all upset and they're ringing you on the phone, oh, my life's at an end, just know that they'll feel like that for a little while, and then that can just change. Their emotions can change quite quickly. They're flirtatious, and it's not always like a sexual flirtatiousness, it's more a flirtatiousness with everyone and everything, with, you know, older people, with animals. They just have this natural tendency to just want to share that sense of love or that sparks of joy with people. They're physically affectionate, very tactile, and they can also be hyperactive. So, you know, anybody with a child that's got a lot of fire in their nature, they're the child that's going to be wanting to run around and do 100 things at once and be hard to kind of settle to do just one thing. They can get easily bored, people with this particular pattern. You might recognise, I see you nodding.
Yeah, my son.
Yeah. And so it's important for them to have a little bit of freedom to do that. It's very hard to sit them down and do one thing for too long. They need to be able to just go off and do, you know, different things.
Yeah.
Really important. So the emotions with that relate to fire can be overexcitement, which can result in panic attacks or anxiety. And the colour associated with this particular pattern is red, but also purple. As you can see, I've got a picture here with the little hummingbird. The hummingbird here in nature represents that the fire energy of moving from one thing to another, from one flower to another. It's that beautiful sense of joy that the little hummingbird presents. And again, I'm going to a little bit later go into more of that. The actual patterns of in your face. So, and then fire breaks down and composes into earth. Now, a person who has a lot of earth in their nature has a natural tendency to be the nurturer. In Chinese medicine, they would say that this person represents the peacemaker. They don't like conflict. But also they're a person who has this motherly nature, this divine mother, having a lot of compassion for their family and for anybody that they consider as their family. Now, this is both men and women. I know that these pictures are all women, and I didn't get a chance to create male images, so I apologise to the men here.
No offence taken.
Yeah, no, good. But as you can see, this is a mother with her child, and in the background there's the houses that represent this need for a sense of home, safety, security and home. And the tree here in the background represents food. People that have a lot of earth in their nature love to feed you. So they'll either welcome you into their homes, and they're often very good cooks, and they'll just want to feed you. Or they may feed you with information, anything that they've accumulated through life. So they're people that are naturally in service to people. They're good people to have in your business. If you've got a business, hire somebody that has a lot of earth, because they'll make sure they get the job done. These are nurturing people, very caring, very giving, can tend to be over-giving, very sympathetic. They look as they see what's going wrong for somebody else, and they have so much sympathy. Oh, are you okay? What can I do for you to help you? That type of energy. They can be very grounded. Family, as I said, very focused on their family. Their homes, for instance, will be very comfortable. Their furniture in their homes will be somewhere they can just sink and relax, and they might be untidy. That's part of earth. They're very supportive people, but they can also be dependent, because a little bit codependent or a little bit needy, because they need family. They need that sense of security and safety. And if they don't feel that, they can come across a little bit needy. And they're very modest. Now, the emotions, and these are just brief qualities, I'll go a little bit further into them a little bit later. But the emotions that relate to this particular pattern of the earth is worry. These are the worry warts of the world. They tend to worry about everything. Go to bed and worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. Or they'll worry about, obviously, a family member that might be under stress. And guilt is also an emotion they can have where they feel they've not done enough, haven't helped that person enough, even though probably they've done more than they needed to do. And the colour associated with earth is yellow, but there's also the browns and beiges, etc. Any questions?
Can you have traits from like earth, all of them or some of them? Or?
Yes, yeah. If you've got that predominantly in your nature, you'll have, a lot of, absolutely. And each of your faces are going to have a lot of different, we all have all the elements, all the 5 elements in our nature. But there'll be 1 or 2 that speaks the loudest. Yeah, but I want you to kind of get a little bit of a groundwork as to what these patterns are before we do a little exercise. And then earth breaks down and creates metal. So, metal is, if we were to give it an archetype, is the artist or the alchemist. These people are very refined. We can also, if you look at this image here, she's the queen. Now, metal people, or people that have a lot of metal in their nature, have a sense of nobility about them. They are a person who they're a visionary. They can see the bigger picture. If we were to look at the symbol for this particular pattern, we've got the queen, but we've also got the king. And we could also call this archetype the father energy as well. It's that role model, that's the top of the household. It's that energy of being able to see what needs to be done and making sure that it does get done. People with this particular pattern are very sensitive, highly sensitive. And when I say sensitive, it's being sensitive, or I should say physical sensitivity. They're sensitive to the energy around them, but they're also very sensitive to the energy of people. And people like this will need space around them. So if I'm looking at certain people, I might see that they've created some space around them. These are idealistic people. They can see life as a little bit black and white. Things have to be just that way. The perfectionist, when they're doing a project, or if they're doing a work project, for instance, they'll stay up to all hours to make sure that everything's done right. They'll make sure that they've crossed every T and dotted every I and made sure there's no spelling mistakes. Because what it does, if they've made a mistake, they physically feel it. They actually physically feel that they've done not enough, they haven't done it good enough. Good enough is, not enough is really quite prevalent in their vocabulary. Very proud. There's a need to feel proud of their achievements, and they will demand respect. And if you upset a person that does have a lot of metal in their nature, they can get quite, step into that. How dare you? How dare you, act like that to me? Quite authoritative. These are people that if you've got them in an organisation or a business, they have this ability to look at the big picture, but they can also have the ability to guide or tell other people what to do, get the job done. Very gracious. They're people that actually, because they feel your energy, they'll try and match your energy as well. They won't feel right until they know that you're okay as well. They're very self-conscious. These are the people who can have the greatest self-esteem issues in that they don't think they're good enough. And they really desire authenticity. They don't like to be in relationships with people that are fake or what they feel is fake or just not meaningful. They love to have meaningful relationships. They don't like to communicate with people that are just talking about the weather. They want to, that bit more than that. This particular pattern too is very, has a sense of the sacred. They'll always kind of be looking up for guidance and and wanting to reach their highest potential. But also if you've got somebody who's a teacher or a guide to you, they will help support you to reach your highest potential as well. Now the emotion that relates to this particular pattern of metal is grief. These are the people who have the greatest trouble of letting go. So if they were to lose someone or something that's of real value to them, they will take the longest to get over that grieving process. And so it's really important for them to realise that they need to take more time. And sometimes for a person that has a lot of metal in their nature, it takes forever, and there is no time limit to their grief. And anxiety is what they're most predisposed to experiencing. Because of that high sensitivity to people and their energy, and that anxiety that I haven't done it good enough. And the colours associated with this particular pattern are whites and metallics and monochromatic colours, etc. Any questions about that? Is it all kind of making sense? Is it interesting? Okay, so we are going to go and do an exercise. Sorry, I'm just going to get everything done.
Which one are you?
Karen's passing around this first exercise. This is fun. This is the fun part.
I don't know what I should feel.
Okay.
It was just like my dad, you know what I mean?
Thank you. It's very nice. You would like
How's that? Okay, sorry, thank you. Thank you for asking. So this is our first little exercise. We're going to have two. And as you see on your piece of paper there, we've got two profiles. We've got a side profile and we've got a face-on profile. Now, what I'm wanting you to do is to break up into partners, into groups of two. Hopefully we've got enough people in there. And what we're going to do is to sit opposite each other and to look at each other's features. So what you'll do, when you're sitting with the person opposite you, you'll get them to sit side on so that you can actually look at their profile. Which is, doesn't matter whether it's left or right, but just on one of their profile sides. And you're going to just notice what you notice about these people. So if I was to go back to water, for instance, water people have really quite large ears, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. All I want you to do is notice if a person's, notice their ears, for instance, and notice if their ears are quite small in comparison to the size of their face, or quite large, or just medium, just normal size. How you can kind of value or work that out is a large ear is where if you were to position the ear along the side of the face, if you can do 3, 1, 2, 3, that's quite a good size ear. That's a large ear. If it's kind of less than that, that would be a medium size ear. And then if the ear is actually quite small, then that's a small ear. Does that make sense? Yeah. And this is not about being judgmental, it's about being very sensitive and aware and curious. So that's how I want you to kind of work in this exercise. And then you'll go and look at the forehead. So with the forehead, you'll be looking again, profile, and looking at if you can notice, and you might ask your partner to pull their hair back so you can see if there's any roundness into their forehead. Or whether their forehead is quite flat. So seeing whether there's roundness, that you can really determine that there's roundness to that person's forehead just by looking at them side on. And if it's not round, then it more or less might be straight up and down, or it might be slanted back. So those actual questions are there. Does that make sense? It's going to be a fun exercise, believe me. I'll come around and just help you. And then we'll look at the cheeks and just notice if you can see a bit of roundness here. I don't have prominent cheeks, so I can't really show you. But everyone's got good sized cheeks. So, beautiful cheeks. So, just notice if you can see that there's kind of roundness here to the cheeks, whether there's good bone structure, for instance, that you can see, nice puffiness there to the cheeks. Or notice if they're just flat, or just if they're prominent, flat, or rounded. And then the nose. Okay, this is where I want you to be just sensitive, because people will be sensitive about their noses, but as we go into talking about the qualities of metal, for instance, you'll come to understand and appreciate your nose if you have a larger nose. So just noticing, is that quite a prominent nose on that person's face? And usually it's by how much it sticks out, or how long it might be, or whether it's quite bony, for instance. So just noticing. And whether it's average or small as well, you know. And then the chin. Now, I've got a good sized chin, so a chin that's prominent will kind of stick out a bit. So it might be sharp and pointed, or it might just be quite strong. So just notice what you notice. And also whether it's average, if it's just a normal kind of chin, doesn't really stick out or anything, that would be classed as average. And if it's a small chin, it might be a chin that is pulled back a bit. It's quite, you know, let's see, there's a word for that. But it's not a strong, it's not either average or large, it's kind of more
Receding.
Receding? Yeah, more receding. Yeah, that's it. So that will be the first part of your exercise, and then we'll come back and just see how you're going with that. We'll still stay partnered up, and then we'll go on to the next part. So will we try that?
Mm-hmm. So we just go round to is that how you want us to do it?
Yeah, do you want to do that? Yeah. All right.
So you can
Okay, so here's our next exercise. Haven't already skipped ahead. So what we have here, and again, this is just a face. Originally I was going to get you to draw faces, but I thought, no, your partner might not appreciate the face that you drew. But I want you to look now at your partner and just notice what the predominant features that you see on their face. So have they got a strong nose? Is the nose something that you're looking at straight away? Or do they have really bright, shiny eyes? Do they have quite a strong jawline? Just notice. And I want you to be still and quiet as you do this. Because this, again, is a sensitive thing. We're really looking at each other from the heart, really. What are you noticing that's really coming towards you from their face? Okay? So be sensitive and don't use your logical mind. Maybe use a bit more of your heart in this exercise. And that will be the first part of this exercise. So that's on that line, like the most predominant features that you're noticing. So again, as I said, it might be somebody's eyebrows. They've got really strong eyebrows. They're really sticking out at me. And then the second part of the exercise, for those who like to skip ahead, is your face can be broken up into 3 zones. So we have the forehead, which represents the analytical part of your face, how much you think, quite logical, or just, how much you use your mind. And the midsection of the face, as you'll see in your diagram, is from the eyebrows down to just under the nose. That represents your practical part of you, how practical that you are in life. And then the bottom section from under the nose down to the chin represents your emotional or intuitive side. So just noticing what you notice with your partner, if you were to break their face up into those 3 sections, which looks like it's the strongest. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Okay. Give me 5 or 10 minutes there, 10 max, and then we're going to have a tea break. Okay. Really what this all means, but I'm going to give you more information about this after our tea break. So I'd love for you to now hand your clipboards over to your partners, so that when we go into the descriptions of all the features after the tea break, you'll be able to then notice what is it that I'm stronger in, that people are noticing about me, which then will tell what elements are strong in your particular features. So thank you for that. Let's have some tea break and we'll reconvene for doing that exercise before the break. I hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully I can alleviate any confusion that you might have. But now that you have your own profiles back, that hopefully you've swapped your profiles with each other so that you're now looking at your own profile. We will start looking at the photos. Some of you are taking photos of these images, and by all means you can still do that when we finish so that you've got a better understanding. I just want to bring your awareness to a couple of books over here to my right on the table here, which that was the foundation. That's where I started when I was learning about face reading. Jean Hayner is my teacher, as I mentioned. She wrote Wisdom of Your Face and also The Wisdom of Your Child's Face. Lillian Bridges is the lady that she also trained with. They're all great books if you wanted to ever develop more understanding of each of these features even more. But I want to give you a good foundation for understanding your features and what pattern or what element of nature that you might be representing the most in your face. So we're going to go to water. Can you girls see okay? So water, as I said, relates to the innovator. The water also is the magician and also the philosopher, can also be known as the healer and the intuitive. So it's a beautiful, mysterious type of quality and energy. So when we're looking for those features in our face, these are the main features, and I'll read them to you. So if you have what we call large ears, and these again, as I said, if they're quite predominant on the side of your head, you maybe can fit 3 of your ears along the side of your face, that's quite a good, strong, large ear. Anything a bit smaller than that would be a medium size, and then anything smaller than that would be small. So large ears, and as I'm showing on this image here, she's got a nice large ear. Plump earlobes. I'll go back to large ears just to describe what they mean. So large ears talk about a person, if you have this particular feature, it talks about you having a good amount of jing or battery life in your constitution, meaning having a good constitution. You don't get sick as easily if you've got nice big ears. It talks about being quite intuitive, especially if you've got plump earlobes. Now you may have large earlobes or ears, but not necessarily large plump earlobes, but still having a good intuition. But if you have large earlobes or quite plump, it means you're quite intuitive when it comes to money. Maybe being able to decide quite easily what feels right to invest in, and maybe being good at budgeting and being resourceful when it comes to money. If your ears stick out a bit, so out from your face, they can talk about you being pretty good at taking risks, happy to take risks. So where somebody has small ears and they might be pinned back more to the side of the head, they're not prepared to take risks. They'll be far more cautious. But the larger the ears, the more, more likely to be happy to take risks, or quite comfortable with that. If your ears are narrow, for instance, there will be a bit more of a need for a sense of safety and security. What else can I say about your ears?
What do you mean by a narrow ear?
If your ear is kind of long. So large ears can kind of be relatively biggish ears, kind of wider than narrow. So if your ears are longish, they're more inclined to be a bit more cautious. It also talks about, if you've got large ears, being a bit more willful and stubborn as well. So there's always a polarity, the good qualities and maybe the bad qualities. Yes. So a widow's peak of the hairline. So this is this little peak here, and some of you have got that, you might have seen that highlighted. This talks about you having really charisma or a natural magnetism about you. People are just going to resonate with you, and they're going to resonate to that energy that's coming from you. And they'll think, well, what is it about you that, can't quite put my finger on. So it's kind of like a natural sex appeal or charisma. So any of you have got that, you can go tick, or you can maybe put little symbols beside those things. If you've noticed that somebody said you've got a widow's peak, maybe put a W there, if you want to get more of a general idea of what patterns you've got mostly in your face. if you have perfectly, I'm going to go to the different hairlines. So if you've got a perfectly rounded hairline, this will talk about how mother might have brought you up. So the actual forehead, or the upper forehead, the hairline, talks about mother's influence. And so when you were raised as a child, if mother's influence or her disciplining of you was quite strong, then your hairline would be probably quite round and very even and no stray hairs. So she would have brought you up pretty disciplined and maybe very strict, and then you will have ended up being maybe a bit of a pleaser. Didn't want to upset mum or don't want to upset other people. If your hairline is more squared, so more squared at the top and maybe even at the side, sometimes people have that kind of a hairline where it's square, and often with the hair that comes to the front, or I'll use Tim as a bit of guideline, where the hair comes in at the temples. That can talk about being kind of an independent kind of person who can be a bit rebellious, maybe competitive, but the rule breaker, happy to kind of stretch the rules a bit and go for it, that type of energy. And if the hairline was uneven, so it's not round, it's not quite square, but the hair kind of juts in different angles, it can talk about where mother's influence was a bit lax, that she kind of might not have been around enough to kind of keep you on the straight and narrow. But mother's influence is all about helping you to fit into society, making sure that you're ready to step into society and be emotionally and mentally, adaptable to society and to fit in. Right. Rounded or domed upper forehead is also another feature. So the roundness to the forehead here, and I know some of you struggled a little bit with that. Is this feature rounded, or is this square, or is this straight? It's the actual upper top of the hairline, so where you pull your hair back, and if you can see there is a rounded or domed feature there. This really relates to water. So what this talks about is that you have this really creative mind, very highly intuitive. You're a person who naturally has been born with wisdom in your bones. You have a link to your ancestors. This can talk about you having inherited something from your ancestral line, and that can talk about being a gift. It can talk about being a talent, or it can also talk about a challenge. So if, for instance, someone up the line was a heavy smoker, it's passed down to dad, passed down to you, that may be something that's been a challenge. That you can now realise, hang on a minute, I've inherited something here that's been kind of passed down the line. It's up to me to say the buck stops here and I'm going to change that, and look into ways that you can do that. But then you may have inherited a great gift. You may have inherited being very arty, or having this really intuitive ability, or even the healing ability. So that's something that, again, you may have inherited. So look at that, look at your family tree if you can. If you resonate with something that you've inherited that grandmother had, and you know you've got this rounded domed forehead, look into that and see how you can develop that even more in this lifetime. If your forehead slants back, this talks about, or being straight, this means you're more of a logical person. And if it slants back a bit, it talks about you being a natural entrepreneur. You they call it the deal breaker forehead when it slants back. So very much a logical problem solver, and really able to negotiate agreements and make a deal, for instance. So I saw more rounded foreheads around here than I did square, but there is some of you that have more of a straighter forehead. Shadowed or puffy under the eye area. So it's this natural plumpness or shadowed area. Now it can be like a puffy type of under the eyes, or shadowing under the eyes. Now it means you need to have been born with it. So if you've been naturally always had this shadowing under the eyes, that talks about you being, well, in Chinese medicine they call this the unshed tears. Because water people are very much connected with their emotions, but can have trouble expressing those emotions, it can be difficult to let those emotions up and out. If you've gained these shadows more recently, for instance, it may be something that you need to address and allow the tears to flow, for instance. But watery people, well, I won't call watery people, but a person that has a lot of water in their nature are people that have great emotional depth, and you're always processing your emotions. And when people, if you're in a conflict or in an argument, for instance, and somebody was to say something quite cutting to you, you will on the exterior not necessarily show that you're upset or hurt, but on the inside it's cutting you like a knife. So be aware that you will give the illusion of being okay, but that will not necessarily be shown, and that's where it is difficult for you to express that emotion. You'll naturally shut your eyes when you're in that kind of an argument situation, and you're trying to create a buffer against the world or against whoever's kind of arguing with you. And when people are in conflict with you, they need to realise that you're going into overwhelm if you do happen to close your eyes. Now, with the puffiness under the eyes, if it's more recent, it can talk about dehydration, that maybe you're not getting enough, taking in enough water. It can also talk about exhaustion, because if I get a chance, I'll show you also, there's a map that displays the actual organs that are represented in our features of our face too. So under the eyes, for instance, and the chin and the forehead all represent the kidneys, for instance. So if you're a bit shadowy under the eyes and you're normally not like that, have a look and see if you're not doing too much, or that you're under stress there with your kidneys. Okay, so a deep and well-defined filtrum is this area just here under the nose. So we didn't put that on the chart because there was just too many things to pop on there. But if you have what we call a nice deep groove underneath your nose, that talks about you, again, being a naturally creative person. And it can also talk about fertility, for instance, with young people, young women. If they have a really deep kind of healthy filtrum there, they will be predisposed to falling pregnant more easily than somebody that may not necessarily have it as deep. So they need to look after themselves there. But they're very much about creativity. And the prominent chin. So the prominent chin here, and we need to get a picture or come up closer to see it, but the prominent chin where there's no real defined jawline. Water people tend to end up later on in life having double chins, for instance. So I'm trying to keep it in mind. Do an exercise that we can do. And this prominent chin talks about this is your inherent power that you've got. So it talks about tenacity and determination and having that strength to power through the challenging times. But it can also talk about having a heavy dose of stubbornness as well, so that when somebody says, let's go do this, and you say, no, I'm not doing it, they may as well give up because they won't be able to budge you. Thick, lustrous, wavy hair. So the hair naturally has to be wavy, not curly, not straight, but just naturally wavy. But if you do stuff to your hair and you create a wave in your hair, that will still give that feature of water more prominence in your nature. No jawline or sharp edges, as I said. So if you found that your partner had no jawline as such, then that really highlights the fact that you've got a lot of water in your nature. And the double chin, and there may be like a black undertone to the complexion. Any questions about that? No. So with a person that has a lot of water in their nature, this will talk about you being a wise, courageous person. You'll be independent, you'll need your freedom, quite stubborn, you'll be a reflective, dreamy type of person, can be secretive. People that have a lot of water in their nature can be a little bit secretive. They don't really want people to know everything, maybe sometimes because they don't need to know, but sometimes it's more of the fact that, that because their emotions are held quite deep, they have trouble even kind of expressing them. And when a person with a lot of water is stressed, And again, if they're in an argument, for instance, they can have trouble accessing those emotions and communicating them, and they can have trouble speaking. They kind of lose their voice. The actual prominent organ or the main feature for the water face is the ears. So hearing is quite important, and if you're having trouble with your ears, it can mean that you're having trouble with that particular water element. The clothing that a watery person would like to wear, they tend to wear flowing clothes, loose, exotic kind of clothes. Clothes that are easy footwear, no high heels. They tend to like to wear things that are kind of just flow, if you imagine the movement of water. And the exercise for these people would be anything that's flowing, so yoga, swimming, ice skating, tai chi, and even dancing. And the occupation for these type of people that have this particular pattern quite strongly are anything to do with art or music or writing, therapists, healers, psychic mediums. And especially if you've got a really nice strong domed forehead, you will naturally have a good ability to tap into the other side. Because if you remember that water is about depth and nighttime and the unseen, you then have this ability to connect very strongly. And I talked a bit earlier about the emotions. Any questions about that? Anybody got any questions? I'll see if there's anything else I can tell you about this. And particularly, and there's a sound that is associated, or the type of voice that is associated with these particular patterns. And so if you've got a lot of water in your nature, you'll have what we call a deep, melodious type of radio type voice. And you may tend to speak slowly, quiet. You may be a quiet person who, when it comes to even doing texts or emails, there may not be many words. There may be just 2 or 3 words in your communications, because, as I said, everything's quite deep with you. The body type for this type of person, large hips. So if you've got large hips, I want you to love those hips because this will naturally show that you have that natural tendency to be a healer or a psychic. And big bones and big wrists and ankles are a part of this particular nature too. So that's that one. You're either all in awe or confused, but let's go to the next. Now, wood. Anybody who's wearing green has probably got a bit of wood in their nature. That would be me. So, wood. Wood, the features that relate to this beautiful warrior nature are the prominent brow bone. So a brow bone is where it kind of sticks up under the eyebrows, and you'll see it mostly in men, but you can see it in women too. And so if you have a prominent brow bone, this will talk about you being a person who is quite direct, wants to, get things done, has a potential for wanting to take charge, be in charge, but also when, as I said, there's always an emotion that relates to each of these patterns, you'll be quite driven, and the emotion that relates to wood is anger. So it can be more predisposed to anger, but that does really represent that the desire to win or to finish that project or to achieve that goal. Full, thick eyebrows. So eyebrows are quite a strong feature with this particular pattern, and as you see, she's got nice strong eyebrows. And if you have naturally strong eyebrows, this will talk about you being a person who is a linear thinker. You can think in straight lines. You're logical. You can be up in your head a lot. You're the thinker. And again, you have the vision. This is the vision, the visionary as well, or the person who has the vision to see the goal and be able to put the steps in place to achieve that goal. Now, it also talks about you valuing logic and practicality, and you're very decisive, and you have a clear vision of where you want to go to. Again, the stronger the eyebrows, or the heavier they are, the more predisposed that you can be angry, get angry about things, especially when you feel you're getting blocked in some way to achieving that goal that you're setting. Another feature is indented temples. That's where, and I've got them, where the actual temples seem to go concave or in. Again, I didn't put this on your chart because there's all too much to fit on the one. But if you feel, or if you look in the mirror tonight and you see that your temples go in, this talks about you being a person who is kind of both worlds. It's like you haven't totally got yourself into your body. It's like you like to float out or explore other realms. But yeah, it can be also an indication of an addictive type of personality, and I'll admit to being a bit addictive when it comes to my studying so much, all the things of life. But it can be important to remember to ground yourself and try and stay in your body a bit more. Larger defined jaw. So here this lady's got a nice squared jawline. So when you can see the jaw and it's quite prominent, this can talk about you again. It's just another strong feature of this particular pattern where you are decisive, strong-willed, you want to get things done. It's represented in nature by the roots of the tree. So if you imagine that the face at the bottom of it, or this jawline, represents the roots of the tree, there can be this, you're not easily knocked over. In this image here, I've put trees in the background because this woody nature relates to the tree and that strength and that, that ability to continue to grow. You'll have strong beliefs if you have a strong jawline. You'll have enormous discipline. You'll set the structure and you'll set those steps in place to get things done. And it also talks about you being able to see a problem and being able to fix it. Can also talk about, though, being a little bit judgmental. Anybody that has a few of these features in their nature can be a little bit judgmental, kind of, the first impression of a person is it. They'll just judge the person quite quickly, whereas it's really important to stand back and look at a person a little bit longer. If it's quite sharp, if the jawline is quite sharp and strong, it can talk about you having firm beliefs and being a bit hard to budge from those beliefs. It's either your way or the highway. But if you have a jawline and it's narrow or it's weak or more rectangular, you're a person that can be more easily influenced by others. And so you may be a bit more indecisive, ask for other people's opinions. So you're not as strong and firm in your beliefs as somebody that has the stronger jaw. So that's that. Straight hairlines. So the features of wood really are all about straight lines. Straight upper forehead, the temples, the jawline. Can even talk about, the straight eyes or rectangular eyes, for instance. Again, all reflecting that beautiful nature of wanting to get things done, being the problem solver, here to create change. And it can also talk about, because the hairline talks about early 20s or the teens, it can talk about being maybe a bit strong-willed and determined, maybe being a bit rebellious. And as I said, hairline juts in the temples. Again, it can talk about you having, maybe having had strict upbringing and where the parents were quite firm, and at some point you decided to be rebellious. Square chin also, that also is representative of wood. Straight lower lids to your eyes. Frown lines are also a strong pattern. Now I haven't drawn her on her, I probably should have, but frown lines look like when you're concentrating and you've got two lines, if they stay there. That's very much a pattern of wood in nature. It just means that you're a very logical person, and that problem solving, you're thinking a lot, which will then naturally create those frown lines. And there will be a bit of a green undertone to the skin. Now you're not going to be able to see that. I don't even look for that when I read people's faces with the colours, but there's just another feature. Any questions about that? I'm just going to show you very briefly. This is what we call, there's yin and yang versions of each of these patterns. So that one is yang wood, so very much out there, the warrior energy. This is yin. It's easier. So yin wood, I just briefly want to show you that there's a little bit of difference. So you may not have the strong square jawline, but you may have the softer rectangular face. And that we'll talk about, as I said, you'll be a person that's a little bit more easily influenced. You'll be a person that can think up all the options of how to go about something. So if there's a problem, you can problem solve, but you'll actually go more into how maybe we can go with plan A or plan B or plan C. But then you may get confused or indecisive, and then you may end up asking somebody else for their opinion or their ideas, and then be easily swayed, whereas you might have come up with the right solution from the start. And I just want to also represent in this image here the eyebrows. When the eyebrows are a bit closer to the eyes, we call this coach's eyebrows. So you'll naturally have this ability to be really flexible and adaptable to the changes, and you'll also be, as we say, coach's eyebrows. Some people can come up to you and they know that they can ask you how to solve a problem, and they know that you'll be able to support them with that. And in the background, in nature, in Chinese medicine, the yin wood personality represents the bendable motion of the bamboo tree, so moving with the wind. It's that wind energy, adapting to change, easily adaptable. Any questions about that? Well, I got your attention, I'll put you to sleep.
So do all of them have the yin and the yang?
No. So water, thank you, that's a good question. So water and fire are the two that don't have yin and yang. They're just as they are. Fire. I'll go back to water. Because water people tend to be, like to sleep in and be a bit low with life. If you've got friends that tend to be late for things, that could be a strong element of water in nature. And you're right, I do have a bit of water in me. So, fire. Fire here they're here to excite. They're the performer. They're the people that live from the heart. Now, the features of fire are sparkling eyes. So if you looked at your partner in this exercise and noticed their beautiful bright eyes, this is a representative of fire. It's what in Chinese medicine they call shen. It's that light in the eyes. Now, as babies, when we're born, we naturally have this bright sheen or shine to the eyes. And as we get older and we have to adapt to the changes and discipline and not being really allowed to be who we truly are when we think about it, we start to lose a bit of that shen. But we can definitely regain it once we really understand our true natures and go out into the world and be who we are. So sparkling eyes. Large eyes or eyes held wide open. So you may have naturally large eyes, so that is a sign of fire. Or even if you have small eyes and kind of tend to open them up, keep them open, that's also a sign of fire. And what the eyes talk about in Chinese medicine, they say the eyes are the windows to the heart. So the more open you have your eyes, the more open your heart is. And it means that that's your way of communicating. So if you have large eyes or eyes held open, this means that you communicate your emotions quite easily. You can be a bit of a contact crier, you can really feel other people's energy. Now, people with a lot of fire in their nature will be an empath. They'll be a psychic empaths, meaning that they will naturally feel the emotions of other people around them. And they'll also be able to a degree, be able to read people's minds, read their thoughts. So if you're a person who has this, we'll go more into these features, but if you've got a lot of fire in your nature, you will be an empath, you'll be highly sensitive. And to be aware of that, and sometimes you'll walk into a room and you felt pretty good 5 minutes ago, and then you're talking to somebody and you think, oh, I don't feel good, I feel a bit off, or I feel a bit sad. You're actually picking up that energy. The Chinese say that because the eyes are the windows to the heart, that the consciousness, or our consciousness, resides in our heart. And so it's not in our head, it's in our heart. So if we have wide open eyes, we've got a wide open heart. And so our consciousness is more flowing outwards, and then we of course then taking more in. Upturned eyes are also indicative of a fire nature. Now, with hair, curly, red, or spiky hair, or even bald, and balding from the forehead back will indicate that you've got fire. So if you were born with curly hair, or if you've got kids that had curly hair, I've got a son who's got curly hair, a lot of fire, that beautiful nature that just wants to spread joy. Would naturally have a good sense of humour probably as well. Dimples also in a sign, and a cleft to the chin, or the nose. So when I say cleft, it's like somebody's got a knife and kind of cut in there and left a decent dent. What that talks about is, so if you have a nose that's got a bit of a cleft into it, in Chinese medicine, the tip of the nose represents the heart protector, or the pericardium in the body. So if you've got a dent in your nose, this means your heart is more vulnerable. And it can mean that your heart's too open to be, or vulnerable to being hurt. And this is one of the things that can really impact a fire person, in that because they've got such a big open heart, their greatest fear is rejection. And rejection, it can do things, well, it can result in heart issues, but also can, result in closing up the heart, not being so ready or open to a new relationship if you were to lose one. And also then the cleft in the chin. This talks about you being a natural performer. So I want you to pay attention when you watch TV or go to the movies, because you may start to notice more actors with a dent in their chin. It's a sign of the performer. These people will end up being in the spotlight in some way, whether they want to or not. And actually, if you do have a lot of fire in your nature, you will. Whether you're a shy person or whether you're quite, exuberant, you will naturally be in the spotlight in some shape or form. There's a great desire for people that have these particular features to be noticed. They just want to feel special, and they want to be appreciated for their good work. And as you can see, when actors and the Academy Awards, there's that real need to feel that they've appreciated for all their hard work. Now, freckles are another sign. So naturally having freckles, quite a few, not just a couple dotted here and there. If your face has got quite a lot of freckles, that's a sign of fire. And any pointed tips to the mouth, or the ears, or the nose, and also to the eyes. So even for instance, if you were to look at a person's mouth and they smile, and the lips stop here and the line keeps going, that's a fire feature. That's fine. And the eyebrows, if there's any points to the eyebrows, and also the inner canthus of the eyes, which is the inner parts here. If they're pointed, they can talk about, because the eyes represent communication, it can talk about how you communicate, and you may be a bit, quite direct in your communication, quite pointed, and sometimes that can come across a little bit harsh to somebody who is not appreciative of being direct, so to speak. Now, the eyebrows and the inner canvas of eyes, I mentioned that. Joy lines. Anybody know what joy lines are?
Wrinkles.
Everyone will say that. Joy lines are these beautiful little creases that we gather at the sides of our eyes when we smile. So when you smile, naturally everything comes up, and then you get these lines beside your eyes. So these are joy lines. I don't want you to call them crow's feet anymore, women. I want you to embrace them, because the more you've smiled, the more those lines will gather. And if you have a lot of fire in your nature, you'll have actually, gained those joy lines earlier than somebody that doesn't have a lot of that feature. There's one person in. There's one actor that I want to highlight. I don't see any joy lines, and that would be Nicole Kidman, for instance. When you look at her images, there's no joy lines, which then makes you not trust that person as much. Because there's certain lines that we see on our faces that... Sorry? Yeah, and there's a lot of people that have Botox.
Sorry? I said Botox.
Oh,
A lot of people, it's a favourite thing in America, although it's happening here in Australia too, with especially young women in their early 20s going off to get Botox. And they get rid of these lines, and then they don't realise that they're taking away what that particular quality relating to that feature is. So if you've got no jaw lines, start practicing smiling, and which will then lift your heart, because as I said, the eyes relate to the heart. So practice smiling.
No.
Lines. No, you don't want lines? I'll do a little bit on lines if I get a chance. And a pink flush to the face. If you see anybody that's really, really red and flushed, they can talk about there's maybe a bit of an issue with the heart there, because the fire relates to the heart. It's because I'm aware of time, I will move along a bit. Any questions about that?
No, I was just going to say Kirk Douglas has the infamous chin. What's his name?
Some of the Baldwin brothers, I think, have them as well.
Yeah, John Travolta has got a
Yes.
strong one. Adele, the singer, she's got a strong one. So just keep looking at your sheet and see if you're noticing any of these features that I'll mention. And we'll test you again. Right, Earth. This is this beautiful, motherly, nurturing nature. This particular pattern talks about being very, wanting to be in partnership, and that family or tribe is very important to them. And being in service, they just love to help and give. Now, the features of this particular pattern of Earth are a large mouth. Now, the mouth relates to relationships. So if you have a nice, generous mouth, relationships mean a lot to you. But it also talks about you being quite a generous person. You're smiling at this, that's someone.
Oh, because James keeps looking at my mouth.
And also your home, because it's about family and home in regard to Earth. If you have a smaller mouth, and quite small mouth, and as I said a bit earlier, a small mouth can be where it's, if you were to run your eyes down from the pupils down, a generous mouth kind of, the mouth goes past those lines. But if the mouth is quite small, in contrast, it can talk about where you're maybe not as interested in relationships, maybe having more difficulty with relationships. And the mouth can also represent your earliest experience of your mother. So if mother wasn't there to nurture you, the size of your mouth can represent that. So And it can talk about safety and security too. So a person that has a smaller mouth can have trouble feeling safe, never feeling quite safe and secure, and maybe being more cautious in their relationships. If the mouth is downturned, for instance, that can be a sign of disappointment, and that, you know, life has let you down. Okay, so full lips, again, that also relates to being quite a sensual and expressive type of person. So if your lips are quite full, that's what that is. And it also talks about your sense of pleasure in material things, what gives you comfort and what gives you pleasure. Plump lower cheeks. So this is this area here. So we've got upper cheeks and lower cheeks. Earth really relates to the bottom part of your face. And so if you've got a naturally rounded face or rounded plumpness to the lowest parts of your cheeks, this really talks about Earth. And it also talks about being a good sign. Well, if we come to the money bags, I don't know if I've got money bags on here, we'll talk about them anyway. So if you see that you've got lines that come down here and there's plumpness here, the jowls, I've got those over the last few years. We call those money bags, which talks about, it can relate to money, but more importantly, it talks about your reserves of stamina or your energy. So the more you've got of that, the more energy that you've got. It also talks about you being a person who's very kind and caring and nurturing. So it just amplifies those particular patterns that relate to that mother energy. And full lower cheeks talk about really appreciating the pleasures of life, really valuing and appreciating your relationships. And you'll excel in jobs where you're in management, for instance. So, and you're always going to be happy to do whatever people ask you. So maybe when you go looking for relationships, look for somebody that has a bit of earth, because you'll know that they'll be there for you. They'll look after you. Wrinkling above, no, I'll come back to here, sorry. The wide bridge to the nose, meaning there's this bridge here. If you've got a wide bridge to your nose, that talks about you having a good amount of stamina to call on, an amount of energy to be able to kind of get you through. If it's narrow, it just means you've got a little bit less of that energy to call on. And you may need to go a bit slower in your work. Visible gums, coming back here. Plumpness below the eyebrows. So if the person that was working with you noticed, I don't know if I did that on that sheet, maybe I didn't. No, I didn't. So if you've got a bit of plumpness under this area here, this talks about having assets, which again can talk about being able to acquire, assets as such, but it can talk about also acquiring information, acquiring material things that you have pleasure in. But it also talks about acquiring opinions and also acquiring friendships as well. Visible gums when you're smiling. So when you smile and your smile's quite broad and you can see your gums, that can talk about you having maybe issues with boundaries, maybe feeling responsible for everyone and can be easily taken advantage of. Rounded eyes or our eyebrows, so anything that's round or soft or plump to the features of the face relate to this beautiful pattern of Earth. It all just amplifies those caring, nurturing qualities. And any yellowish undertone to the complexion. And also, as I said earlier, plumpness to the nose also relates to this beautiful feature of Earth. Any questions about that? Now, this is what we call yin Earth. Now, you were saying earlier, do all the elements have, yin and yang? And as I said, not all of them. And this one's got actually two more types of Earth. You're not necessarily going to see a lot of difference in the face, but I just want to talk about briefly that we have a yang version of Earth, and we've also got what we call a central Earth. So if a person's got a lot of Earth in their nature, and this comes more up in their birth date than necessarily in their features. They're going to be a person who has a lot of strength, a lot of stamina. They're going to be very much about looking after the tribe. They have a great sense of justice. So if you've got a work colleague who doesn't like how things are being done or wants to fight for the underdog, they're the person that you know is going to step up and say, hang on a minute, this isn't right. These are people that really are here to learn the bigger lessons in life. They've decided to come in and experience life and develop a deeper transformation. Again, you won't necessarily see it in the features of a person's face, but in a person's birthday, this will come up quite strongly. And there's what we call central earth, and a person that has a lot of this, what we call central earth, again, they have similar features. They've still got all the plumpness and the roundness to their features. But if this is in your birth date and you've got this strongly in your nature, you're naturally going to be the CEO of your own company. You're going to need to be the manager or the top dog in your workplace because you're the person that naturally knows how to fix the problems. People will naturally come to you. It's like you're the centre of everyone's world and they just gravitate to you. So I just wanted to show you that there are other versions of Earth. There is 3 types of Earth. And you may just already know that this kind of sounds like you. That's
What's the birth date though? How does that come into it? What sort of...
Well, we look at the year that you were born, and that will, that's going to be another workshop. More than 2.5 hours. Yeah, this is the thing, because you have your face that you were born with all these particular features, but then there's so much more to you, because then you look at your birth date, and then you get the whole map. So this is half the map, but it's a good start. So then we get to metal. And metal is about refinement, about appreciating beauty, about really being the idealistic person who just wants things to be perfect. The main features of a person like this, who's either the queen, the king, or the father archetype, they will have a predominantly strong nose. And it will be a feature that you really do just straight away. It's something you notice about that person straight away. It will be a large nose. Now, the nose represents a person's sense of power, or pride. It represents their pride. So a person that has a strong nose will naturally have a sense of wanting to be proud of their achievements. And there's different types of noses. So this particular person that has quite a strong nose will have a greater need to feel a sense of achievement. They'll need greater respect from people. They'll be independent and ambitious, and they may be a bit of a trailblazer. And they'll want to achieve a higher position, or just naturally achieve a higher position in their work. When we say a bony nose, for instance, could also indicate this pattern, which means you'll be more refined again. If, for instance, if you had a plump nose, so some of you had quite a plump nose, which was kind of that earthy nature, this means you're interested in, both being proud of what you do and your achievements, but also, combining that with the pleasures of life. But if your nose is more bony, it will talk about you being very more focused on the material things in life. You'll give more priority to your ideals and to your, to the material things like money in your life, more so than any kind of other comforts. Prominent cheeks. So prominent cheeks is when you've got and I don't have them, so I can't really show me, but if you've got strong prominent cheeks, and I think you have, Juliet, you've got good cheeks to have a look at. This talks about you being a person who is able to speak up for yourself, being able to being able to manage other people, for instance, and being able to tell them what to do. In Chinese medicine, in the old days, and maybe still today, they call them bossy women's cheeks. So they would say to men back in the old days, don't marry a woman with those bossy cheeks, because that's not a good sign. And but so enjoy your nice prominent cheeks. If you have sharp and bony cheeks, so yours are quite rounded and soft there, Juliet, but if somebody's got really sharp cheeks, and I'll try to highlight that here in this image, this can talk about you maybe not being so concerned about how you communicate or how you speak up, and may not be as kind or other focused in your communications. And flat cheeks, if anybody's got flat cheeks, and mine's relatively flat, I don't enjoy telling people what to do, and may not necessarily like to be told what to do either. And self-esteem issues can crop up with when you've got flat cheeks, can actually have lack of self-confidence about your accomplishments, and probably preferring to work alone as well. Now, if you've got sunken cheeks, so under here, where it's kind of the cheek is rounded and then sunken, this can talk about you having a sense of lack and anxiety, and maybe feeling not good enough can come up a fair bit in your vocabulary, but also could be depriving yourself, because the cheeks represent the lungs and oxygen, so maybe not taking in enough oxygen can be represented by those cheeks. Highly placed curved eyebrows. In Chinese medicine, if you see somebody with rounded, quite strong rounded eyebrows such as this, they call those the Queen's eyebrows. So with that particular feature, that means that this person will have excellent taste. They'll want the best of everything. If you imagine the Queen, she's treated pretty well and she has the best of everything. But there'll also be high expectations of themselves and also of others. But very gracious, but can be a bit intimidating to others. And people with these features, and particularly if you have a lot of metal in your nature, you're naturally going to need to have space around you, needing to kind of not always be in a whole group of people, needing to actually get away and have space. And that's very important for you to have that, especially at the end of the day, because it helps you regroup and collect your energy back to yourself. Any sculptured or any symmetrical features to the face represent this particular pattern, and any extra space between the features is also an indication. So also notice that there's visible upper eyelids here, this part here. So if you have that, that also is a sign of this particular pattern in your nature. And it can talk about when it comes to struggling or feeling that you're suffering from something, you'll want to suffer alone. You won't necessarily want people around you, and you may not ask for help, only because you don't think anyone else can help you. Moles are also a pattern relating to metal. I have a mole, and anybody else that has moles on their face, I want you to embrace them, because they do represent giving you extra power to any feature on your face. So for me, it's given me extra willpower, extra courage to fight through the challenging times, probably also a bit of extra stubbornness. And so wherever your mole is placed will also indicate more of that particular pattern. So if you've got one on your nose, it just talks about you having more of a desire to have respect or pride in what you do and in your achievements, and also your own sense of power. Any wrinkles such as sorrow or grief lines are also relating to this pattern, and sorrow and grief lines are represented by little wrinkles that come down from the sides of the eyes here. So the joy lines tend to go horizontal out from the corners of the eyes, but sorrow lines come down. And this can talk about having gone through experiences where you've experienced sorrow. But if these lines were to go any further down and come into the cheeks, which I do have a picture for her somewhere, such as our yin. So this is yang metal, And this is yin metal. She's got a few more wrinkles. If those lines were to develop and become more down the face and down onto the cheeks, this will talk about becoming grief lines. So the actual sorrow is a lot deeper. The experiences have created more of a sense of that deep grief. What else can I say about you? And there will be a pale kind of undertone to the complexion. Any questions about that? Are you noticing on your chart, if you're looking at your chart, whether you're noticing any of these features and if anything's sticking out that you might see that is predominant?
Not that I can see.
Is it okay if we go maybe 5-10 minutes over time? Is anybody in a rush to go? Just let me know. You have to leave now?
Not right now, you can wait about 5 minutes.
I just wanted to briefly, I don't know if you're going to see this. This is just here. These are more wrinkles, so I just want to give you a bit more of an appreciation of wrinkles. So you may not see the wording so well, but we have different wrinkles that can form due to the experiences that we have. We make little micro expressions, and as I said earlier, a person with wood will be very focused, and if they're very driven and wanting to get the job done, they can tend to think a lot. They will create little wrinkles here, which can be frown lines. But if you've seen anybody that's had 3 lines, frown lines tend to be 2 lines there in the middle of the eyebrows. If you see 3, it can talk about that person having been quite angry in the past, but having kind of grown through that. They've kind of developed.
What is that one straight across?
That's on the nose?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have a chat about that one in a second. That's relating to, that can relate to digestion, for instance.
Oh, okay.
So having, maybe, we can, even see signs of diabetes and pancreas issues with certain signs. Sometimes you'll see lines coming down through the face, so across the nose there, maybe across underneath the philtrum, and maybe on the chin as well. They talk about breaks with the past, meaning that as you come into a particular time of your life, so if I was to break this space into decades, the early teens are at the forehead, the 20s are across the forehead, the 30s are across the eyes, the 40s are across the nose, and the 50s are across the mouth, and the 60s across the chin. So, and then you've got the 70s and the 80s and 90s, etc. So if you see any lines coming through horizontally down the centre of the face, you can talk about, as long as it's a proper fine line that goes straight across, you can talk about a break with the past. So a break with the past as you go into your 40s, for instance. So I got one of those. So that's where I separated and divorced and all the rest of it in my 40s, early 40s. So I've got other wrinkles here. If you see any lines, and I know I've got them, just above the eyebrows, just a couple of little lines there, they can talk about, just on the curves there, can talk about being sceptical. So it's kind of like where you can't do raise an eye, and somebody is saying and not totally agreeing with it. We've got joy lines, we've got sadness lines or sorrow lines, as I said. Well, sadness lines are a little bit down from the eye, and then the sorrow becomes more down onto the cheek. And then we've got the grief lines that come here. And then we've got humour lines. I don't quite agree with that thing there. But if you see a little line just in the bottom lip of someone, that talks about that person being quite a jovial kind of, can crack a joke, very kind of a good sign of sense of humour. these lines just above the mouth. As I said, this is representative of the 50s. So if you develop some lines above your mouth there, that can talk about having over-nurtured, over-given. And I'd love to see anyone who's a mother here put up their hand and say they haven't felt that they've over-given in some shape or form or another. And it can just talk about, having over-nurtured other people and not really looked after yourself. And then there's lines that you can develop underneath your mouth because you've pursed your mouth over, those times that you've given and nobody's given back to you. You will develop little bitterness lines, as they say, underneath the mouth. But also disappointment is where, the mouth turns down instead of turning up. These lines here, coming down from the nose down to the mouth, are called purpose lines. So I want you to embrace those as you develop those, and you'll develop those more maybe into your 40s and 50s, although we see young people developing them too, meaning they're already working according to their true nature. They've kind of got it on my path and really on their, working their life according to their true nature. So embrace those. I kind of want you to embrace all your lines because your lines do talk about you having gone through the experiences of life. You're learning the wisdom of them. And once you know what those lines mean, you can start to nurture and heal eating issues that have come up through your life, and wrinkles can actually start to disappear. So they're just really hallmarks of showing that you've gone through those tough times, and also it's like a wake-up call, really. What have we got here? Fear lines that may develop if you find that you've got any dimpling or shadowing or any lines in your chin. That can be representative of that water feature, which means that you've been quite fearful. Okay, also in front of the ears, if you have any little lines that come down in front of the ears, they can talk about you as a child having heard certain stories from mum and dad. Mum and dad said, now this is the truth, and you've kind of thought, no, that doesn't sound right. So they're kind of lie detectors as such. Any little wrinkle or line that you see that cuts down through the lobe talks about a potential for blood pressure issues. So again, it doesn't mean you're going to end up with high blood pressure or low blood pressure, but just as a sign that there's a potential for it, and just to pay attention to that side of things. I think that's about it.
Excuse me, what about the ones like across?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
They're the lines you will develop as you're going through your 20s. And so when you're in your 20s, that's a period where the kids get out there, they may move out from home, although these days they take a bit longer. Maybe back then they did. And so they go out into life and think, oh my God, that's not what I expected, and then they end up frowning. So they will develop those lines in their 20s. And again, that just talks about having learned experiences as, wisdom from those experiences. But sometimes if those lines don't go straight across and maybe halfway across or not complete, it can mean later in life having an experience that kind of finishes that line off. That goes a bit deeper. We've also got here underneath the eyes, if there's any lines that come down from the inner canthus down onto the cheek a bit, these are called lost loves. So you've been in relationships and lost that relationship, or you've gone through an emotional loss. That can be represented by those lines. And we can also have these, what they call them, disempowerment lines onto the nose. That can talk about smiling when not genuinely, but meaning that you smiled when you really didn't feel like smiling. I've actually got a few of those because I think I smiled a lot as a kid when I really didn't feel like it. Any questions about any of that? Oh, we have some other lines here too. You may see people that develop a line up through their forehead, and it will look more like a discoloration, but sometimes it's a proper line into the forehead on an angle here. To here actually. That can talk about having gone through the dark night of the soul. So this person's really gone through some heavy stuff and developed that particular line. But it means they've gone through it and it's done, so to speak. So it's called a transformation line. Yes, so that's it.
How about lines in your eyebrow?
Yes, that can talk about again too that you've depleted that particular wood energy in your nature, and it can also impact how you get, that drive, that natural drive that you would have, and will also impact your liver, because the eyebrows can represent the liver, or the condition of the liver. So that's my last picture. So you depleted your liver energy, so to speak. So any issues that happen on the face can represent what's going on in the body. So this is just a general chart to show you that these patterns of nature can also be overlaid with the organs of our body. So here the eyebrows, as I said, are the liver, the gallbladder, spleen, spleen and pancreas, the kidneys, as I said earlier, under the eyes, kidney and the bladder on the chin. The heart is represented by the tip of the nose, as I said earlier. Your heart protector is there on the tip of your nose, but also your heart can be impacted with the eyes as well. That's shown there. The lungs and the nose. The nose and the cheeks represent the lungs, because metal element relates to the health of the lungs and also to the colon. Your reproductive organs are represented here by the philtrum, and that's why I was saying earlier, if you've got a nice strong philtrum, you've got a good strong reproductive system there. Stomach, the intestines, so the upper digestion and the lower digestion are represented by the mouth. So if you were to get any discoloration, for instance, there, or any issues there, that will be directly relating to those areas. And as I said, the kidneys also represented by the ears. So there'd be so much more information I'd love to give to you about all of this, but I'd go for hours, and we don't have hours. So I hope that this kind of has given you some insight into your face, and also given you hopefully a bit more of an idea of what features you may have strongly in your face, and start appreciating your face, because you're born with that face for a reason. And I want to finish up my little thing. I just have to finish up as I do. That's fine. So, I want you to just close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to be aware that what you've taken in today is just a little glimpse into a part of your personality, and that your beautiful face was designed by your soul for a reason. And that this information today, if you haven't kind of taken it in all logically, it has come in on another level, intuitively, into your unconscious, your subconscious mind. So as you go home and look in the mirror tonight, I want you to look at your face with a greater sense of appreciation, and notice the sparkle in your eye, notice those beautiful cheeks or that nose or that chin, and say, I've got a better understanding of who I am. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more. But this is what I can show you today. So you can open your eyes. And I thank you so much for all coming today for my first workshop. I hope you've appreciated and enjoyed the information. If you want to access any information further, there's the books that you can access by going to Book Depository or any of those book places, or otherwise I can get something for you. And if you're interested in having a reading of your face and your birth date, I do 90-minute readings from home, but I also do over Skype or Zoom, where I can go into more detail and give you the map to who you are, which will also answer questions as to why am I here? why is this happening to me? Or why am I having a problem with this relationship? There's so much more insight that I can give you than I could do here. Well, this is just a bit of a taster, but as I said, I hope you can go home and fall in love with yourself even more after today. So if you're interested in any information from me or being put on my newsletter list, or for me to catch up with you, please leave your details on a clipboard I've got here. And thank you so much. So Lisa, can you just tell us what you felt about this workshop today and what you learned?
Well, I think that I just got a bit of an insight of how my facial features affect, I guess, my personality and how I view things, and also from a different level of partners and friends. And I was writing down notes on like things that I picked up on my friends' faces and how that might actually relate to them and maybe my relationship with them as well. So yeah, got quite a lot out of it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lisa. Hello, Tim. Can you just give us a bit of feedback on what you noticed today or what you enjoyed about today?
So there's a couple of things that I enjoyed about today. From the whole facilitation, which was really lovely and laid back and really sort of communicative between everyone. So being able to engage with those other people in the group was really good, and you could actually see in real time what was going on there. But we could also, it was really interesting to see the connection between the features on our face and where they're connecting into the other parts of our body was one of the things that really stuck with me, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah. So what's your takeaway? What will you take away with you today?
What will I take away? Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's on a level where you can sort of trust your intuition when you do see these features on other people. And obviously it was, like the tip of the iceberg today, but it was a bit of a confirmation to say, maybe there is a bit of a feeling about that, and maybe there is something a bit more to it.
Fantastic. Good. Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, Juliet, can you tell me what you felt about the workshop today?
Well, it was really good. I feel like I've got a lot to process now. There's a lot more thought when I look in the mirror. I just went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror and went, that's really interesting. But even different personalities and traits that are actually come from our face. We can see that in our face. It's fascinating.
And so what's your takeaway? What are you going to do differently today after learning all this information?
I'm going to learn more. I think that's my takeaway. I'm going to learn more and be able to look at more of who I am and what I can do to change different parts that I've learned today.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Juliet.
You're welcome.
So, Diane, tell me, what did you think about the workshop and what did you notice that you enjoyed the most?
It was good, very, very informative, but it was just, I'm looking at somebody else, staring at somebody else's face and trying to pick out different features and stuff like that, where normally you would just look at a face as a whole.
Yep. And so you enjoyed the exercises? Was that helpful for you?
Yes, it's very good.
So what's your big takeaway for today?
That was just a snapshot. I need to learn a whole lot more.
Fantastic. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.